Hey guys, welcome to Braun's Painting Network. If you've stumbled onto this video, I assume you must have been conducting research on how to properly conduct your own residential interior painting project. If you've been here before, then you might already know that recently we've been doing a lot of videos on what I refer to as the 5 task pillars of residential interior painting project. That is setup, job site protection, surface preparation and repair, paint application, and cleanup. For this video, we are providing a full-blown tutorial on paint and roller application. But you can go back anytime you want, go to our playlist titled The Paint Trainer Series and learn about all these other aspects of residential interior painting and keeping your learning journey going forward. All right, let's paint some stuff. We're flying through the paint application with our cut and roll on this bedroom, and this is a great illustration of what I talk about with order of operations for our painting project and interior painting. This is why we paint the ceiling first. We want to work top down so that anything that would splatter or trickle down on the wall is going to be then painted over. But we were able to move very quickly when we painted the ceiling by being able to just crash onto the ceiling without worrying about getting any paint on the wall or having to use painter's tape or anything like that. So we did that first, then we dropped down and we did the same thing with the casings. Colin painted all these casings pretty darn quickly yesterday, and because he wasn't worried about this cut line, he was able to crash this edge and get it painted. Now when you're crashing the edges, what he has here is perfect. What we don't want is big, heavy sags, runs, or hard edges because that texture will show through the paint. All we have here is just the discoloration from the white. When we put 2 coats of this wall paint over the top of that, it's going to hide it perfectly and it's going to look outstanding. Now that we got the ceiling and the upper trims done, now we're going to go through and we're going to paint the walls, and we've already been through a lot of the walls on here. We're going to finish this last wall, and then once all the walls are done, after they're completed, we will finish with the baseboard. In this case, because this trim is already painted white and we're just keeping the same white and we're freshening it up, we're just doing one final coat on the trim. So we're not going to paint the baseboard until the very end. We're going to wait until we get the second coat on the walls, and then we will finish and we will paint the baseboard. Because we're getting painted, we don't have to worry about painter's tape down here because we know we're going to paint this. So that's why we save it for the last. Now we can roll both our coats on the walls, and then we can cut our nice clean lines here. Our casings, when we're rolling the wall, we're going to cut our very nice clean line with a brush coming down here. It is much easier to cut clean lines on this side of the wall than trying to cut a line like this, painting the trim last. You got a little lip, the brush is very difficult. Here we got this wide surface to cut a brush down here, and the same is true of ceilings. A lot of times you'll have heavy texture on ceilings, and it's much more difficult to try to cut a clean line on the ceiling than it is to flip it around and now cut your clean line up here. So that is why we do things in the order that we do it. We always usually save the doors for last because they don't really interfere with any of the other substrates. Now, if we need something to do to keep us busy while these walls are drying, then we'll jump ahead and we'll start painting doors. What we have done here is we have spot primed these major repair areas, and in this case, we primed it with the paint. We're using a high quality self-priming interior paint to where we can just spot prime directly with that. You could also spot prime with any sort of waterborne primer like Zinsser 123 or All Prime, Smart Prime. You have Kills 3. There's sheetrock primers. There's a lot of great primers out there. And the real reason we're doing this is because we want to seal off the porosity of the repair that was fixed with joint compound is kind of soft and smooth. The surrounding wall areas are sealed off with a harder paint film. So if you were just going to paint over the repairs, and this is especially true if you're only putting on 1 coat of paint, you will see what is called flashing, because the paint is going to absorb more into the repair areas than it does the surrounded painted areas, and it will not look uniform, and you will see flashing, especially if you were looking down a wall on the long way and you have light crossing it. It will not look right. Now, we always recommend applying 2 coats of paint, and that is for a couple of different reasons. In this case, we are doing a clear color change. We're going quite a bit lighter. Even with the best paints, you will not get perfect hide. If you want to zoom in on this repair a little bit, you can see the transparency. And when you have a very light color like this, there are some scenarios, if you're going over a very dark color, where you might even have to 3 coat. In this case, we're going to be good with double coat on this, but you can see some of the transparency that you have. We started applying over here and you see some of the transparency in the coat. This is really good, high quality paint. Even with that being said, you're not going to get 100% hide. When you put a second coat, you also are going to build up the film, and you're going to have a little bit more durability and washability in the paint because you have built up the mill thickness of the paint. It's difficult to build up paint thickness with a roller versus if you were spraying, so that's why 2 coats is almost always recommended. If you are doing an exact color over color and it's a relatively fresh paint job you're going over, then you can definitely only do 1 coat. If you are going to do just 1 finish coat, spot priming the repairs like this before you paint the whole wall at one shot is very, very important. Now, I have a 2.5 inch wide angle sash brush. You can see that it's got a subtle little angle in there that's going to make it really nice to cut in clean lines and to work into corners. We are featuring the Handy Pal here, which has liners. You can see how nice it fits on my hand. It's got an adjustable handle, so it'll fit all kinds of different size hands. Probably not Andre the Giant, but most normal people will be able to fit. What I like about it is the liners. We're able to use the same pal and change and work with multiple colors in the same day without having to keep cleaning out the pal. Also has the magnet here, so we have the stainless steel part of this brush. Brush holds right on the magnet, and then it keeps the brush from dropping and falling into our paint there. So we're gonna get after this now. I'm a reasonably tall guy. I think I'm about 6'1"-ish, right around there. So this is a lower ceiling, so I could actually reach the cut line, and I do this all the time, so I could do that. I'm going to recommend that the typical person would probably be better served getting a small stepper. We have a little one over there, and you want to be a little bit more on top of it. You want, if you're down at a down angle like this and this low, it can be tough. All right, so I got on top of this step ladder now, and right now you can see that my head is almost touching it. I am right on top of this. Now I can really see what the heck I'm doing and cut a nice, really clean line. My biggest recommendations, this Handy Pal is so nice. It is so comfortably in my hand. It's lightweight. Highly recommend these. You can also cut from the paint can, and we'll illustrate that for you too. There's some helpful tools between pot hooks and thumb tools that allow you to be able to do that. But these are just incredible. And all I'm doing is I'm just gonna dip a little bit. For this type of interior painting, just dip it. You don't want to overload. You can tap your brush, wipe a little bit. Some people like to wipe it up here. Others will have a little technique where they'll just kind of, tap it like that. You don't want it sopping and dripping off. There's plenty of paint on there. When we're cutting, we don't want to take this fully loaded heavy brush and take it right to the ceiling. You want to offload down here. Dry this brush out a little bit, put some down here. Now, this is where we're going to really take advantage of this angle sash, and we're going to pop it in the corner like that. See how I'm kind of fanning that angle in here, and we'll get a closer look of the way that I'm holding this in just a minute. But now that I'm right on top of this, I'm able to kind of glide this right along the ceiling and cut this through. Now I'll drop down and brush that out. We don't want to leave heavy edges down here. We want to come down probably a few inches. And then we're gonna, when we get the roller, we're gonna roll as tight to the ceiling as we possibly can. And we're gonna go through. See how I'm holding this brush? You might get your hands dirty, okay, as a painter. You don't wanna be down here Good luck trying to do that. I mean, you probably can, but you really, when you're up high on the stainless steel, you got just incredible control of this brush. And if you're somebody that doesn't want to get a lot of the paint on your hands, that's where gloves would be a great solution for you. So when you're putting the brush up here, we also don't want to be like this. We don't want to be like this, trying to cut like this. We don't want to try to be like this and cutting it. You can't see what you got to play the angles. See how I'm angling? It's about a 45-degree angle, and I'm letting the tip lead the way. I'm going to pull it back down here, and now I'm going to drag this through. And then I'll drop down a little bit lower so I'm away from the wall, and then I'll pull some of this paint back. Now I can flatten it out because I'm not cutting in. You don't want to overwork it and make it too transparent. Now I'm in a situation where I'm on a ladder. I got long arms, so I'm gonna actually come out here. I'm gonna come this way now. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Now, again, I'm playing the angle here. Now we got pretty good room for error with our cut lines because we're talking about a flat white ceiling and a pretty light cream color. If I was working with a dark blue, there'd be a little bit more scrutiny on the cut line because you're going from such a bold color to a stark contrast. So now I want to optimize and take advantage of my ladder move here. So we've cut that. I'm just going to drop down now, and I'm going to cut in along the top of this line. This cut lines, there's not a lot of scrutiny here, right? Nobody's going to get up on a ladder and obsess over what that cut line looks like. When you're down on the ground, you can't quite see it. So I don't even mind if I'm crashing into the top of this white casing a little bit. That's not a big deal. I'm pulling it back. Now when you have a situation like this, you could just fill that in with this brush. We're going to pull out the whiz roller in a little bit, which is a very small micro roller, and it's always great to use that too because then you're going to make sure it'll reduce some of the brush application texture and it'll be a little bit more uniform to all the other rolling we're going to do with the big rollers. So I just wanted to demonstrate you could fill this in with a brush. This is a great candidate to be whiz rolled as well. So now we're going to come down here, and again I'm just dipping it, tapping this off, not overloading my brush. Now we're going to cut right to this casing. Same thing. I don't want to be like this. Don't want to be like this. I can't see what I'm doing. I pull it down like this. Look at the sight line I'm giving myself to see what I'm doing. I'm leading. I'm almost just putting a little bit of pressure on the brush. It's fanning the bristles out. And now we're just going to come right down here. Again, I have really good room for error. I love these cut lines because we're dealing with a very light colored wall color, and we're dealing with white casing. So, we're going to be able to kind of pull this through pretty quickly. Yeah, we're coming down this window casing here, and you can see this little angle tip. How nice, you just use a little bit of pressure and you're able to really manipulate around these little jogs. See how I'm doing? I'm just putting a little bit of pressure, pulling through, pull it down, make sure we're not having any heavy edges or sags. Come back through, and now I'm low, so now I'm just going to cut down and come through here. There's not a lot of scrutiny on the underside of this windowsill, so we're just going to kind of come down a couple inches on that, and boom, cut that in. And we're just going to come around the other side here. Now what I would do is I'd move my ladder over, bring it right here. I really only probably need to make 3 ladder moves in this case. Get right on top of it and get this cut in. One of the great things about doing 2 coats of paint is you get an opportunity to go back through after this first coat is dry and look through all the repairs and all the great prep work we did. And if we see any other minor imperfections that we think we can improve, I call that secondary prep. We'll go back through and we'll clean some things up. This would be an example. Like, I don't love, there's an old drip right here that we never scraped off when I went through and did the sanding, or when I went through and did the scraping. I missed that. And again, not a huge deal, but when you're looking for professional results, I'd like to see that scraped off. And hey, and if I don't, who's to say that we didn't do that? So if you're a contractor, the customer might have never seen that before, but now they might think that that came from you because you didn't address it in your process. So that's a prime example of where I'd scrape that off. Can you hand me a 5-way tool? So in this case, that's big enough to where I always like to have a 5-way scraping tool in my pocket. So I won't even wait. If I see that while I'm applicating, I'm gonna go ahead and just chunk that off right now. Scrape that off, pull that down, and I'm gonna minimize that. If you ever wonder why my shirt's so dirty, it's because of things like that. So it's like, hey, if you're a tall guy, like, I can do this, you know, and if you're really focused on efficiency, like, I don't even need the ladder, but I do prefer, and I would like to see my team be up on here. If you can do this and you can cut clean lines standing on the ground, I'm fine by that. But if you say you don't want to use the ladder, then I come in and you got wavy lines all over the place, then you're going to be on a ladder the next time you do it. I'm just going to crash this. I want to flood this out with paint. Just crash right onto it, and then it's going to make it work. And then when we paint this baseboard, we'll cut a nice clean line onto that lip. But now, if we were painting blue or green, I would not want to crash onto the baseboard this much, because even 2 coats of white is not going to cover up a dark blue or green. You'd have to go over it like probably 3, maybe even 4 times. But you can see how quickly that went. You know, if we have outlets, you can roll up to these, but I like to just kind of, the very outer edges, I like to brush those through. And we're crashing right onto the baseboard. We're really flooding this intersection with paint. And then now, when we cut this white, we have all kinds of room for error cutting this lip and that line. But see how quick and easy that was? Cutting that baseboard. Again, if this was, say, stained wood, or was some off color or something like that, we might not be able to do it that way. But for this project, it works out perfectly. We got Colin doing his thing here, stretch Armstrong. Colin's also over 6 feet tall with Inspector Gadget arms. So you can see how easily he's able to get that without using a step stool. And hey, if you can do it, this is the way to do it. Very efficient. See how nice his glide is working that corner. You can see how he is working right directly out of the paint can. This is an alternative method. Rather than using the handy pal, if you're trying to save money, just work right from the can. You can see how he's got his thumb underneath the handle. He's got his fingers underneath the bottom of the can to support it. They make little thumb tools that you can put here to slide, that hook onto the lid, and then you can slide your thumb through. It'll take some pressure off you. Now, Colin's used to doing this. His hands have been through some battles, so he's able to do this without too much trouble. This might really bother somebody as it puts all that pressure on there. You might not be able to do it for very long. So we'll make sure to interject a video of the thumb tool that I'm talking about. See how Colin manipulates the tip of his brush, just releases a little bit of pressure, fans it out, and is able to really manipulate those brush bristles. Just takes a little bit of getting used to, and you'll get the hang of it. See how quickly Colin just knocked out that ceiling cut. Again, he's stretch Armstrong, but when he offloads his brush, he keeps it pretty close to the ceiling line without getting right on top of it, and he pulls it all the way down, and then he drags it right back across the top and really is able to get that cut done down about 3 inches in 2 quick passes. Really easy to cut in corners because you just really need to flood it and get those edges painted. You don't have to worry about cutting anything in. See how Colin just taps his brush a little bit, clears some of the excess paint. Colin is working away, cutting in this window and this wall. You can see on this one, we just cut in the ceiling line and above the window casing. And now we're gonna fill in this gap with the micro roller, the 4-inch whiz roller. Colin's gonna roll out the top of this window with the 4-inch whiz roller. He already cut the ceiling and the casing, and rather than brush in the whole thing, we have this whiz roller set up, and he's going to really brush out the whole area. That's going to give us really good application texture uniformity because a lot of the rest of the wall was rolled out, and that'll be, you know, and it's also going to be more efficient. Another thing I'll say while he's working with this, when it comes to cutting in your walls, you can see this wall over here was one of the first walls we painted, and as it dries, you see that it's starting to lay out. We have you can see here, we have a lighter color, and as it dries and lays out, you're starting to get good uniformity here. You can't see any halo effect or shadowing from the cut texture to the roll texture. However, we are in a light color in a matte finish. When you are working with higher sheen paints, satins, semi-gloss paints, or when you're working with darker colors, it can be a little bit more challenging to not see the difference between that little space where the cut line is that you were not able to get with the roller, and that. So what Colin is doing there, where you're getting horizontal side to side usage of the whiz roller, there are times where we will cut it in and then use that small whiz roller all along here and kind of add that roll texture. We can get a little bit tighter to the ceiling, and it's going to take away some of that brush mark texture. And so if we are in a situation to where that can be stubborn, that's how you reduce possible halo effect. But again, the lighting conditions in here are favorable. We're using a matte finish paint, which doesn't reflect as much light, and we're working with a lighter color. So most cases, we're not going to spend the extra time to do that because it's not a good value for the customer. All right, guys, we got this wall cut in. This is our last wall. We're going to roll it out. Let's talk about some roller application tips. This is my favorite interior roller size. It is 14 inches wide. You usually will see 9-inch rollers. 14-inch or 18-inch rollers are all very common for interior rollers for both ceilings and walls. There are also 4-inch micro rollers, which we'll be using that a little bit too, and you'll see that in action. They're kind of called whiz rollers or mini rollers. And this, to me, is the best compromise for most residential spaces. I love that it covers a lot of ground because it's 14 inches. It's going to cover more ground than the 9-inch. You can still maneuver in some of these tight spaces if you want to. But the 9-inch is nice, but it's going to, you're going to have to make probably 1 or 2 extra passes for every little section of wall. And there's, anytime you got to do more runs of application, there's more chance of error, especially for an inexperienced painter or a DIYer. The more passes you have to make, the more chance of having poor overlaps and having ropes come down the wall. So if you can cover more ground in one pass, I think that's the best way to get really nice application. On the flip side, if you had an even bigger roller, it's almost difficult to get into some of these tight spaces. Plus it becomes so wide, if you have any pits or divots in the wall, sometimes it's so wide and it might be difficult for that really big roller to completely fill any voids in the wall. So this is the 14-inch roller. Absolutely love it. And we have a 14-inch pan here. So these are Wooster products. Wooster roller frame, pan, roller pole. We do just like the other things, we have a liner in here so that we don't have to worry about cleaning out this 14-inch pan when we switch colors or use a different product. Makes our operation a lot more efficient. You can see my Wooster roller pole is adjustable. I believe this is like a 2 to 4 foot adjustable pole, something like that. So that snaps into place. Really nice. So if we were on the ceilings, we would probably pull it down to like right here. On the walls, I'm going to pull it tight and work with it that way. Nap thickness. This is a 3/8 inch thick nap, which is great for these types of residential walls. They do make them skinnier and tighter, down to 3/16 of an inch. That's for really smooth surfaces or maybe metal doors or something like that. 3/8 is perfect. Some people would even use a 1/2 inch nap on walls. The thicker you go with nap thickness, then the more paint it's going to hold and the more passes you're going to be able to make with one dip of the roller. On the flip side, it's going to be a little bit heavier for you, and it's also going to typically leave more application texture. You're going to get a little bit more of that orange peel or stipple appearance when you have a thicker nap. So we typically use 1/2 inch on the ceilings where we have more texture and there's more pits and gritty sand paint and things that we want to have a lot more paint to fill all those valleys. We almost always use the 3/8 inch thickness on residential walls like this. All right, so we're going to start rolling. And maybe my biggest application tip is it just starts with the dunk. You don't want to overload this pan with so much paint that it's filling up here. You're going to make a mess of your roller when you dunk it. You don't want to get too much. You want to get plenty of paint on your nap. And I would actually suggest we'll probably move it here so it's out of my walk area or my workspace. And I'm going to, when I dunk this down here, I'm going to pull this up one. I don't want to just jam it all the way in there. If I do that, it's going to be flooded. I'm going to have paint dripping down on the ends. And if I got paint all over the ends, that's where I'm going to tag things and I'm going to have drips and runs coming down the wall. So we want to just ride down this little slope here, just grab a little bit of that on either side and just kind of go like this. We're not completely dunking it and soaking it, but we're just pulling it and going like that. Want to kind of offload. Now, what you can do, most of this is captured. We didn't flood it so much to where we have crazy drips, but the longer you leave it here, gravity will eventually take it down. So if you get it loaded up, when you pull it up, a nice little best practice is just kind of rolling like that. As you take it to the wall, you just kind of go like that and it'll keep it in line there. Now the next thing, when you're putting it on there, do not start high up on the wall. You need to offload some of this paint. I would want to start pretty close to this corner, about here. I want to offload some of this paint and dry out this roller a little bit. Now I can come back and when I pull back, I can ride it up onto the wall and try to take it as close as I can. If we have too wet of a roller and we're rolling it up here, when we get close, get in on that, Colin. Even here, even what I did there's just a little heavy up here, a little bit of potential for sag. So what I'll do, if I see that, I'll just kind of offload, dry out my roller, and just kind of take a nice dry brush and just kind of fan that out. I'm getting pretty close to the ceiling here. You know, the closer you get, the bigger risk you run of tagging the ceiling with the end of that. Now, in this case, we have painted the ceilings. We have the ceiling paint right here. If I did tag the ceiling, it's not like something where I'm going to cry in my soup over it, but I don't want to do it. I would be able to touch it up. But if you had old previously painted ceilings and you don't have ceiling paint on you and you tag that, that's going to be unfortunate because now you're going to have to try to figure out how to repaint it and is it going to match and all that. So, you know, we don't want to have too much paint and push it up too close. You want to really kind of have the dry roller when you're moving it up here. But we're going to fan this out. And you can see I'm pretty much tackling it up and down. Some people might talk about doing V's and stuff like that. To me, that's pretty, I don't really think that's that necessary. As long as you offload some of the paint, we'll come down here and I'm going to get as close to these things as I can. But you don't want to get so close like that I'm scraping along the wall because I might scrape some of that paint off. You're getting all kinds of issues in there. So now we're going to have to kind of pull that out with a brush. But you want to get as close as you can to the wall without hitting the wall. You want to use this side of the roller, not this side, because if you're using this, number one, you can't get as close to the wall, and then you're also going to be probably eventually going to scrape and drag. If I pull this down, I'm going to see you kind of scraped it and pulled some of the paint off. So you want to use this and go that way, and then we just want to make sure that we level out our edge here and go from there. Now that we're away from the wall, we can flip this around. And now that we're away from the wall. Now we'll go and use this side as we approach the next edge of the wall. So I'm gonna go in the middle of the wall again and just kind of offload it, dry this brush out. See, I'm gonna take it kind of down close to that outlet, bring it up here. You can finagle this a little bit. And then I'm gonna drop it down, make sure that I'm really getting good overlap and I'm not leaving any ropes. And I got a nest. What I really like to do is once I get leveled out, I just like to finish long on a section. Take it down and pull away. We don't want to be like this in the middle of the wall and then walk away, because you're going to get chatter marks. And particularly, we could probably get away with it with flat and matte paints, but the more sheen and gloss you put and the more natural cross light you have coming against the wall, you're going to see all those chatter marks and overlap marks in your paint. So we just want to really, once we get the paint on there, finish long, and finish strong. So we're going to do that. Now I'm going to flip this around now. And again, I'll offload some of this. And now that I've flipped the roller around, I can get a little bit tighter here. Come up here. Drop this down. See how I'm kind of flipping the roller around based on what my needs are. Come down here, pull under here, a little back and forth here, pull it up, flip this back around. Now ride it up this wall. Now I gotta dry. This would be a good spot. Now we could also use our small mini roller up here. I've already brushed it in, but I could also take, you wouldn't want to load the roller because it's gonna be very difficult to thin out that paint, but you could take a dry roller like this is another way to do this, and take this 14 through here, and you could do this. Maybe a little bit more difficult than if we just had our little mini roller for that, but this is certainly a reasonable way to do it as well. Here, in a small section like this, this is where I would kind of just offload it. Get the paint off, dry out your roller. Now let's go through. One of the things about the orientation of your roller is when you have your overlaps, it's nice to have this side on your overlap side. I mean, if you're an experienced applicator, you can kind of do it both ways. As long as you're dialed in and you're paying attention to what you're doing. You definitely want to use this side as we're butting up to the casing. Remember, we already painted this. We still got to touch this up here, but we don't want to be smashing into casings that we already painted and have to keep doing a bunch of touch-ups. If you use this end on your intersections, so it can be a lot more easy to get ropes. This side has a tendency to get a little bit messier and you get more paint buildup, and this might have a bigger tendency to leave ropes at your intersection. So as much as possible, I try to use this side for the intersections and drop it down. And then if there's any roping, it's going to be on the other side, which we're going to be going back over. Now, the thing about it though is if you rely too heavily on one side versus the other and you're putting pressure, you can almost start to whittle down the one side of the nap versus this side. So it's not a bad idea to flip it around every once in a while. I'm just kind of overlapping, finishing strong, making sure you don't have any ropes in here. Now what do I got to do? Now I got to flip it around because we're butting up to the wall. So I don't want to do this because I'm going to risk scraping up my wall and I can't get as close to the cut line. So now I'm going to flip it. See how I'm offloading in the middle, and then I can really get nice and tight here to my cut line when I flip it. And then what I would do once I get this pass, I would just make one last pass. I'll flip it this way, and now I'll come back up with the other side and pull some paint through. can see how Colin turned the angle of his roller to get into a difficult to reach texture issue on the wall and to cut in that ceiling a little bit tighter. And then he just flipped it right back around and ran it continuous all the way down. So you can definitely manipulate the roller to your advantage as you work along. You just want to finish in one consistent up-down motion when you're done. See, Colin turned the nap to get into that tight space. He's going to work around the plug, manipulating the roller. One dunk is all he needs to work on this section to the left of that window. He's working all these tight spaces, and then when he moves on, he'll kind of just run it a little bit long through there, and we'll be in good shape. See how he's going to come all the way up, work it all the way through, and we can avoid any flashing or application lap marks. He's going to come back on this side and run it up, running really nice and tight to the other wall. It's going to look great. We are plugging along on the final coat here. This wall is drying, and you will see as it dries, you have a little bit, the wet paint is a little bit lighter than the final paint as it dries. That cut has already been close to drying, and then it's rolled behind. So don't be concerned about that while it's still wet. You let the product dry out, and once it all is 100% dry, that'll all flatten out and look really nice and uniform. When you are rolling out ceilings and working overhead, really recommend wearing safety glasses like this. I promise you, when you're painting overhead, you're going to get little speckles of paint that fall down, and it is not fun getting in your eyes. Even relatively safe acrylic latex paints don't feel great in your eyes, and I highly doubt you have a eye washing station in your home. So wear the glasses, especially when you're rolling out ceilings, and thank me later.